Welcome back to my channel. Today we begin a fascinating journey through the 12 rules of life. In this video we will explore the first 6 of the 12 rules of life. Video part 2 will be released in the coming days. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss part 2 and enjoy the video now. Have you ever heard the term pecking order? It's often used to describe hierarchies and power relationships. But do you know the fascinating history behind it? The term originated with Thorleif Skjelderup Ebbe, a Norwegian zoologist who studied the behavior of common chickens in the 1920s. Within this feathered community, there was a clear hierarchy in which the physically strongest and healthiest chickens always took the lead in feeding. This so-called pecking order is not limited to chickens, but can be observed in various forms throughout the animal kingdom. In their studies, the scientists found that fighting for resources in lobsters not only has physical effects, but also affects the animal's neurochemistry. The winners produce more serotonin, while the losers produce more octopamine. Surprisingly, this chemical difference is also reflected in the animal's posture, which in turn influences future conflicts. This dynamic can also be found in human behavior. Research shows that people with alcohol problems or depressive disorders often tend to shy away from competitive situations, which can increase their self-doubt. In contrast, people who experience success adopt a more confident attitude, which in turn positively affects their chances of success. This leads to the first basic rule. Stand up straight and square your shoulders. This wisdom is based on the fact that a confident posture can give you a decisive advantage. So, if your confidence needs a boost, remember to present yourself like a winner. An upright and confident posture can make all the difference, not only in the animal world, but in human interactions as well. Suppose you have a dog that gets sick. The vet prescribes medication. Would you question the doctor's advice or not? Many people ignore their doctor's advice. Why do we often take better care of our pets than we do ourselves? It's partly due to a lack of self-love. We are constantly painfully aware of our own shortcomings, which can lead to a kind of self-punishment. This belief that we don't deserve to feel good about ourselves leads us to take better care of others than ourselves. This idea of unworthiness leads us to one of the oldest stories in human history, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. One possible interpretation is that original sin perpetuates the belief that we do not deserve our own love. But we can also interpret the biblical story differently. Part of the world must have been corrupt beforehand in order to seduce Adam and Eve. In this reading, man and serpent represent the eternal and natural interplay of order and chaos, as embodied in traditional Eastern philosophy and the yin-yang symbol. This natural duality requires a healthy balance of light and dark. Overemphasis on one side leads to imbalance. Imagine parents who try to protect their children from bad influences at all costs, but only replace the chaos of the world with the tyranny of excessive order. There is no point in trying to be perfect. Don't try to defeat the chaos or darkness within you. You cannot win this battle. Avoid doing things that make you superficially happy and focus on what is truly best for you. This leads us to our second rule. Think of yourself as someone you need to help. Discipline yourself with the same caring attitude you have for your pet. Ask yourself, what do I want to achieve in life? What steps are necessary to get there? Act accordingly and take loving care of yourself. Along the way, many of us leave our familiar homes, whether for a temporary change or a new phase of life. But now imagine that among your childhood friends, there was one who never left the nest of his hometown. Instead, he stayed in the circle of local ne'er-do-wells. Now, when you occasionally return to your hometown, you can observe the slow decline of a former friend. Dissatisfaction and bitterness grow, and the friend's former potential turns into dislike. The reason for this is that the ne'er-do-wells in the village had a destructive influence that prevented your friend from realizing his full potential. This may seem like a harsh judgment, but reality shows that something similar can happen to any of us. Empirical studies show how sensitive we are to the behavior of those around us. Here is an example from the workplace. An underperforming employee who joins a team of top performers drags down the performance level of the entire group. It is therefore crucial to distance yourself from people who have a lasting negative influence and instead cultivate friendships with supportive people. This has nothing to do with selfishness, but with the pursuit of positive change. In light of these experiences, our third rule of life is formulated as follows: make friends with people who mean well for you. Good friends are not only supportive, but also confrontational when it comes to showing you reality. They are there for you in difficult times and are committed to helping you become the best you can be without losing your way. Do you know the saying about the pike in the carp pond, or the one-eyed man who is king among the blind? In both cases, the protagonist stands out from a small group of inferior competitors. However, much has changed since these quotes were written. The modern world is not a carp pond, but a global community, and there will always be someone better than you. But why this eternal comparison? Why are we always so hard on ourselves? Well, self-criticism is important because without it, we would have no motivation. We would have no drive to work on ourselves in any way. Sooner or later, nothing would matter. We tend to see the present as imperfect and project our hopes into the future, which drives us forward. But when it's all about comparison with others, self-criticism becomes ugly and destructive. We lose sight of our own progress. Important progress is often small and difficult to measure. Imagine looking back on the past year at work and realizing that you were less productive than your colleagues. If you only think in terms of comparison, you will feel like a failure. You could also zoom out and look at all areas of your life. That's why it's so important not to compare yourself to others, but to yourself. Real progress is measured by your past results. If nothing is happening, you may be treading water, and that is a sign that you need to take more risks and set more ambitious goals. So our fourth rule is, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to others. Inspect yourself like a real estate appraiser, examining every area of your life. Is the flaw cosmetic or structural? What needs to be done to improve it? With this approach, you focus so intensely on yourself that you don't have time to compare yourself to others. Imagine this scene. A toddler is running around like an axe in the woods, unnoticed by his parents. Someone observing this might wonder, are these bad parents ignoring their child's behavior? Or are they perhaps wise enough to give the little one the space he needs to develop? Approaches to parenting have changed over time, driven by the age-old nature versus nurture debate about the extent to which our character traits are innate or nurtured. Jean-Jacques Rousseau coined the idea of the noble savage in the 18th century. In his view, our prehistoric ancestors lived in gentle, childlike perfection and innocence before the bloody influence of civilization corrupted the noble nature of our species through envy and violence. We now know that this romantic notion, while appealing, is wishful thinking. Research suggests that we are all born with innate aggressive instincts and therefore must first learn to become gentle, empathetic, and civilized adults. Truth be told, children are sometimes more brutal on the playground than most workplaces could ever be. So what does this mean for us and our rules of life? It is up to adults alone to mold the young savages into socially acceptable adults. We must raise them to be responsible and kind people. This is especially difficult because no one likes to be the boogeyman. Of course, it would be nicer if you could grant all your children's wishes. But part of a child's aggression is the instinct to constantly test boundaries, to find out how things work together. Parents need to be able to set clear boundaries consistently. Sometimes this is not fun, but think of it this way. Children can learn these important lessons from loving and sensitive caregivers, or they can learn them the hard way later on. Which would you prefer for your child? Which brings us to 3 basic principles of good parenting. First, set as few rules as possible. Too many rules create frustrated children who feel they are always doing something wrong. Stick to a few simple and understandable basic rules, such as don't bite, kick, or hit others unless you are defending yourself. Second, be as strict as you need to be. Your rules will only be effective and fair if you communicate them clearly and enforce them consistently. Punishments should be appropriate, i.e., only as severe as necessary to get your child to respect the rule. Sometimes a disappointed look is enough. Sometimes it takes a week without a smartphone. Third, pull together as parents. Kids are smart enough to pit parents against each other. Parents should stick together. Parents are human and fallible. An attentive, supportive partner will point out mistakes and step in when you are overwhelmed. So the fifth rule is, don't let your children grow up to be unsympathetic and irresponsible people. Of course, there is no such thing as perfection. Mistakes are an inevitable part of parenting. But if we do a reasonably good job, our children will eventually take responsibility for their own destiny. Existence is undoubtedly filled with challenges, setbacks, and suffering, a reality that many people face. Throughout the centuries, many individuals have sought radical answers in the face of a seemingly cruel world. The Russian author Leo Tolstoy, influenced by the unpredictability of life, identified only 4 legitimate life strategies: childish ignorance, hedonistic intoxication, suicide, or defiant perseverance. In his essay Confessions, Tolstoy reflected on these attitudes and came to the provocative conclusion that the most honest response to the unpleasantness of the world is suicide, while perseverance merely indicates a lack of courage to take that step. Others have probably come to a similar conclusion, but have taken other people with them in their suicide. Sad examples are the horrific rampages in U.S. high schools. The USA set a macabre record in June 2016. In the previous 1260 days, there had been a staggering 1,000 shooting rampages in the country. Each time, a person had killed at least 4 others before taking his own life. This is not a solution. Whether or not Tolstoy was right, no one has the right to kill indiscriminately, regardless of the individual suffering and injustice someone has experienced. This is at the heart of the 6th rule, which primarily calls on people to recognize their own mistakes, rather than blaming others for them. The Russian author and system critic Alexander Solzhenitsyn is a striking example of this attitude. He was a committed communist and fought against the Nazis during World War II. In 1945, he was taken prisoner of war in the Soviet Union for speaking out against Stalin's communism. Despite a harsh life in the Gulag and a cancer diagnosis, Solzhenitsyn resisted despair and accepted his punishment. He decided to use the time he had left to do something good and meaningful. So the 6th rule is, clean your own room before you criticize the world. Solzhenitsyn demonstrated this by taking responsibility for his actions and writing The Gulag Archipelago during his time in the Gulag. This harrowing narrative revealed the atrocities of the Soviet prison camps and exposed the glorified image of Stalin. As such, it stands as a living testimony that even in the darkest hours, it is possible to defy suffering and injustice by taking personal responsibility and working for a worthy cause. I hope these 6 rules of life have helped you and given you a new perspective. If you don't want to miss the next 6 rules of life, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. See you next time for part 2 of the 12 rules of life. Here's to resisting again.